Welcome to Letters from Norway, offering an American perspective from Oslo, with your host, Nick Cameron.
Okay, welcome to Letters from Norway. I am here with my hot wife who's offering me encouragement and support. In today's podcast, we will cover Bitcoin, money, currency, and gold. With Bitcoin making headlines and hitting records, I thought it would be a good idea to discuss money in definite terms. It's something that we work for, need, and use every day, but rarely think about in terms of meaning. Very few people think about it, actually. What is money in the first place? But first, before starting the show, I would like to thank Matt in Indiana for the sound engineering and advice. Every week, in addition to making us a sound file, he offers tips on how we can improve the podcast. So, what is money versus currency? First, I'll tell you my definition of money or currency, money in general. To me, it's just a storage of work. You work, you get paid, and then you're given some money or some currency or whatever you want to call it, a commodity. And that's kind of your exchange for your time. So you give your time to someone and then they give you something back which you can spend on food or buy back some time later in terms of a vacation or periods of not working. Now, there are traditional definitions and properties. On the show notes, I posted a chart defined by Mike Maloney, the author of The Hidden Secrets of Money and goldsilver.com website. In his video series, he explains this topic at greater depth than I can do in a 20 to 30-minute podcast. But in general, he defines money as a medium of exchange that is accepted as payment. It's a unit of account. You can put it into different denominations, and it can be counted uniformly. It's portable, that you can take it with you. It's durable. It doesn't fall apart so easily. That's why you can't use food as money, because it decays or it rots. It's divisible. You can make change, essentially. It's fungible, which means each unit is the same as every other. That means $1 in my pocket's the same as $1 in your pocket. I mean, that's just so obvious, but I guess that's one of the technical definitions. Maybe in the past that wasn't true, that everyone had a different kind of dollar. It's a store of value. That means it maintains its value against commodities over time. And this is where money and currency differ. Currency is not this. Currency is not a store of value. Currency is actually a decay over time, as you can see through inflation, where money, which is like gold, silver, supposedly Bitcoin, hold its value against commodities over time. The other definition I added, at least, or others have also agreed to this, is intrinsic value, that the unit of money itself has some value. Like, for example, gold, you can wear it. It's like jewelry. You can make it into other things. You can make it into sculptures, or you can, use it for, making foil. There's like this gold foil that reflects light, and they use it on spacecraft. So it actually has some value in of itself, where currency doesn't. But there's more of this on the show notes and links to Mike Maloney's sites to get more details about this. Present-day paper currency is on the way out. Personally, I don't like paper money. It's a pain in the ass, especially when you're living in Europe and crossing borders. When you go to Norway, to the EU, to Ukraine, to England, you always have to exchange the paper money, and you lose a lot of it. It's just easier to use cards. I have to admit that's true. I don't like electronic money, but I have to admit it's easier to use. And governments obviously are encouraging the use of electronic money because they can track you and find out if you're not paying your taxes or if you're, buying stuff you're not supposed to be buying. Anyway, that's also kind of out of the scope of this for now. But I'll give you a very brief history of paper money and where it came from. So as I was talking about, like chickens and grain and these things could not be used as money by itself or traded so easily. So people used to hand out vouchers as a proxy for a commodity. So like, for example, gold is the most common one. So you have a pile of gold and you take it to the bank and they give you a voucher, and then your gold is in the bank. So again, there's more of these stories on the internet as well. But eventually what happened is that people stopped claiming the gold and just started trading these vouchers. And that eventually became currency. The kings of the time and the rulers of the time caught on that they had a new racket, that they could actually just issue the paper without having the gold behind it, because people had so much faith in those quote unquote vouchers. And nowadays, they can't even print the paper because there's so much money out there that's been created digitally. And that's why we're seeing this corralling towards digital money. This is quite evident in India when they canceled the high denomination banknotes and tried to, and replace them with the new notes. In the process, they're trying to get people to go digital. So if you're holding paper money in your house, especially that lesson in India can teach you, if you're holding any kind of paper and money in your house, you shouldn't do it for too long period of time. You should find some different way to store it, or some different medium to store it in, because governments can cancel it, they can take it away, it can be inflated away, it can even be banned. I mean, so just think about that one for a while. So people always ask, how does currency lose its value over time? I'll give you an example. So when my parents came to Minnesota back in the 60s, a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house cost around $15,000. And now today, that same house outside St. Paul, Minnesota is $400,000. And so they call that inflation. What is actually inflation? I mean, people don't think about it. They just assume that it's supposed to happen. It's just a part of everyday life. The academic explanation is that it's an expansion of the money supply, and then the prices rise as a consequence. After the money supply has been expanded, all that extra money supply has to find its way to a limited amount of goods. The production in goods has not been rising with the increase in money supply. So if you're rising the money supply faster than the amount of goods, then you get the price expansion and the inflation. So if you're increasing industrial output, you can't expand the money supply without seeing the price rises. You'll have inflation, but you won't have the price rises. So that's an academic explanation by Austrian economist. Peter Schiff is one of the popular ones. He talks a lot about this on his show. So I'll leave it to you to get more details on that. But what I'll tell you is my definition of what inflation is. To me, it's just a new form of slavery. It replaces chains and whips with currency manipulation. It replaced the ownership model of slavery with a leasing model like Uber is doing with car ownership. You just use the car for when you need it, and you don't have to worry about servicing it or taking care of it. You just press a button, you get your ride, and it's the other guy's problem to take care of it. It's a better way to use the resources. You don't have to deal with all that ownership headaches. So in 1865, we can say that slavery never ended. It just changed form. They used currency manipulation, and that allowed them actually to enslave everyone, not just black people. So that's why I always tell people, in 1865, slavery was never ended. It was just extended to all of us. It changed the form of slave ownership from an ownership model to a rental one. So you pay a person, a little bit of salary, and then you take all the money back in the form of rent and food, keeping them dependent. And you can enhance this effect by giving them loans, make some goods in China for, $50 like an iPhone, and then have a monthly payment plan, for $50 a month to pay for that quote unquote $1,200 retail price. And you can keep people indebted for a very long time. And the virtual shackle, the one that makes the person feel indebted and obligated, is much stronger than a physical one because they don't know it exists. And it's their own feelings like that they owe you something, that they're not being forced, that they must work and pay back that debt. That's much stronger than any tool of brutality that was used over 150 years ago. When a slave gets sick or dies, it used to be a total loss for the owner. The owner had to take care of the slaves, clothe them, feed them. It was very expensive. But now with this payment model, this salary model, you pay, you put out a salary, people show up, they do the work, and then you pay them at the end of the day, and then they have to pay you rent or pay your friend rent for the room and pay for food from the other farmer, who obviously inflates the price, and then you just keep them in a subservient state. You don't have to worry about anyone getting sick or dying like in the olden days. So like Uber, currency manipulation allowed the slave masters to choose from a pool of workers instead of being bound to one, replacing them as needed. He doesn't have to worry about any overheads, as we discussed. This form is more sinister because you're not even aware of your situation and cannot comprehend the system around you. Government and central banks are always trying to find ways to corral us unbeknownst to the common person. So Please keep this thought in mind for the remainder of the podcast, because there is a history of this, of being manipulated and having clever ways of introducing new systems to enslave us, and it doesn't feel like slavery, or it doesn't feel like we're being tricked. So the parties that run the world and run the powers, they've been thinking up this stuff for a long time. Just keep in mind, you can think up a lot of stuff when you don't have to worry about a mortgage or a job, or finding somebody for the rest of your life. When you're a billionaire, all those things just fall out of the sky for you, and you have just a lot of time on your hands to think. And that's always been true for ruling class people throughout history. So just keep that in mind for the rest of this podcast. Hold those thoughts, because we're going to come back to them. If you are a millennial and weak on your history and economic education, then I recommend you watch a movie called In Time with Justin Timberlake and Amanda Seyfried. And this explains this enslavement concept through currency quite well. It's an excellent movie, and I'll put it down in the show notes. Everyone should see this movie as part of their economic education. Okay, so the next fundamental thing we want to discuss here is, what is a bank? I mean, it's more than in philosophical terms or in practical terms. It's a vault. It's a place that you store money, store your things. Long back in the olden days, it's a place where people stored their gold. And that's when they were given the vouchers that they could come and reclaim their gold. So that, in a simple sense, is the origins of a bank. And then later on, they start loaning out money so you can buy a house, charging interest, and that's how they also made money. But what is the meaning of a bank when real interest rates, when the benchmark interest rate is at or below the rate of inflation, or I should say below the rate of inflation, and money is digital. So you no longer need it for vaults, for storage services. Also, if you put your money there, they take it away. That's what negative savings rate is. Like in Sweden, you put in $100 in the bank, the next year it's only 99.5, and every year it's decaying away. And in addition to that, they even charge you fees for having your money in the bank. So think about that. What is a bank? Here in Norway, for example, I don't even go to the bank to take money out or put money in. I do that at the post office. If I need cash, it's crazy but true. I go to the post office and get cash there. And if I need to deposit money, I deposit at the post office. The only thing we go to the bank for is to get loans. I mean, when you walk into the DNB office here in Oslo, they have a lot of monitors on desks, big fancy screens like giant iPads. And you look at all the different loan products, and they're just trying to get you to borrow money to buy stuff. It's crazy. The only reason banks are even in business, and again, this is a bit out of the scope. There's a lot of other people talking about this. It's because the governments are buying all the bonds. The bank lends out the money. They have a debt certificate, and then they sell that to the government so they can get some more cash, because there's no market for that. The interest rates are too low. So the only people buying that are taxpayers. We pay taxes to the government, and then they buy these bonds from the bank. Banks essentially went from a savings and loan model where you deposit money and they loan it out to you, to a bailout and con model. They get bailed out from the government, and then they loan that money out to really risky people, taking stuff back from them and becoming a landlord. So again, they went from a savings and loan model to a bailout and con model. That's how I see it. Where would I put money instead of a bank and, Bitcoins, and I don't want to put everything in gold? The trick I found out here in Norway is that I put all my cash savings into reliable dividend stocks. And that's something we'll talk about later. What are the reliable dividend-paying companies? But I can give you a hint. A lot of them are fishing companies and companies making industrial equipment, like these recycling machines by Tomra. They're going to have a steady demand, and they pay out a nice dividend, especially the fishing companies. And that dividend money can be used to pay your rent. So then you're not tied to a huge mortgage, and losing all your savings won't be tied up in the house. You still then have liquid savings. And that liquid savings is now invested into dividend-paying stocks, which pay your rent. So essentially, you're living rent-free, and you have mobility. So you don't. It's a kind of a cool model, but we can talk about that. I will probably have a podcast on very specific stocks that I've been using to, pay my rent with. Put my savings into those stocks. Those stocks have appreciated very nicely because some of those dividend payments are 5 to 7%, which beats out the bank. So there's been a flow of money coming into dividend-paying stocks. And in addition, you're also getting that 7% back every year, which you can use to pay your living costs. Pretty cool, huh? So now we'll be moving on to Bitcoin. Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin all about? Well, let's just talk about what it is in very brief terms. It's a decentralized cryptographic currency with quote unquote mysterious origins, appearing in 2009, born out of the financial crisis. I remember this. Just all of a sudden, people were talking about it, Max Kaiser and all of these people. It just came out of nowhere. And I was a bit skeptical. I even won a few Bitcoins on Max Kaiser's site for a movie script idea. I posted on there and a couple of Bitcoins were donated to me, but I sold them at $6 each and bought a pizza. That was, now I look back, that was kind of stupid, but I had no idea what they were and where it was going. I kind of do regret the decision. But Bitcoins are to paper currency or bank electronic currency what MP3s are to records and tapes. It is what Facebook and MySpace were to good old-fashioned hanging out and socializing with strangers. It just digitalized a current process. So the actual benefits of Bitcoin are actually pretty good. In theory, it's out of the reach of government control because it's all on distributed servers. Everybody is contributing to Bitcoin. There's no central Bitcoin server. So it kind of lives in the cyberspace distributed among all the computers. Compared to Western Union or your bank, it's practically free to transfer money anywhere in the world. I think they only take 2 cents of commission on every $300. I mean, it's invisible. You wouldn't even notice it. And nowadays, having Bitcoins can even get you laid. Everyone's taking them, so it is kind of spreading, and it's got some big pluses. It's definitely got some upside to it. And I'm personally, holding a few of them just in case that this mania goes really out of control. However, I just want to point out that there are some notable weaknesses and bottlenecks with Bitcoin. The first one is that you need a wallet to deal with these things. And, I've gone online, and I'm pretty simple. I'm not a computer hacker or programmer or anything like this. I mean, I work in the IT sector, but, I'm more on the business side, and I don't like to get deep involved with technical things. So I looked for a wallet that was easy to use. And all of these easy-to-use wallets that are recommended by Bitcoin, this is the conversion medium because you can't actually hold the Bitcoin itself. It has to be inside a wallet. So when I signed up for a wallet, one was called blockchain.info. I had to give up my Norwegian details, my name and personal number and these kind of things. And what I found even more interesting is that this blockchain.info wasn't even approved for Americans. Anytime I would put anything to do with me being American, it wouldn't work. So I had to put in all my Norwegian credentials. I have a Norwegian permanent residency and American citizenship. So these things aren't very American friendly. They have been repositories or these wallet companies like Mt. Gox in the past that were robbed or where the owners ran off with money. So these Bitcoin banks or places where you store your money are not always safe and always reliable, that there have been issues with them. Here's the analogy. Bitcoin and wallets are like gold and vaults. The Bitcoin itself is indestructible and, can't be broken or stolen. Let's say broken. It can be stolen. But you have to put them in these wallets, and these wallets are the weakness. It's like gold. Gold can even survive without the planet. I mean, it's a cosmic element. You have to store them in a vault. Or if you do store them in the vault, it's the vault that has a vulnerability. The other one is we don't think about so much because we take it for granted is that the other weakness, I should say, that we don't think about, but that we take for granted is that Bitcoin depends on internet connections and electricity, which can also be monitored, as revealed by Edward Snowden. That's why he's in so much trouble. Hackers are getting more and more sophisticated by the day, both government and non-government ones. You have to remember the government is one of the biggest employer of hackers. You can go to any college campus like MIT or Caltech, and one of the biggest recruiters of this math people with the math minds and computer science are U.S. government agencies. Now, according to Kramer, he's this guy with a TV show on stocks back in America. Banks are hoarding Bitcoins to pay off hackers, outside hackers. They hold the banks hostage, put ransomware or something in there, and they need to be paid off in Bitcoin. And so Kramer thinks these things are going to $1 million. And I can say, just based on, reading about all the manias of the past and living through the NASDAQ bubble in the 90s and seeing this Bitcoin thing as it is now, anything is possible. He could be right. I mean, it's a purely psychological play. So I would say, just have a few of them. I wouldn't bet the house on them, but, buy them on the dips. There's a dip right now. Don't put anything that would jeopardize your living into them. It's a gamble, but it could pay off, and just have some goals. So, if you have a few of these things and your goal is to pay off your house, be very disciplined to get out of them, when it meets your mortgage value, and then pay off your house. And don't worry about the upside loss, because you never know when the next day comes where it all crashes and disintegrates, or where it's banned, or where the government, seizes all these quote unquote wallets. That's some food for thought. We have to remember that governments, organizations, and sometimes very determined individuals have always been able to crack locks and codes over time. They cracked the Enigma machine in World War II. Hitler had this communications device, and no one thought it could be cracked. But the Americans and the British, I believe, cracked that one. So if you look at history, all the kind of locks and gates and security measures have always been overcome, and it can still be done. It's now getting harder, but as time passes, people eventually figure these things out. And I have on the show notes a screenshot from the DNB bank here in Norway. I couldn't get to my bank account the other day. The servers and everything had crashed. So that's another thing to think about as well, that these things are not always reliable.
Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe on iTunes and follow us on social media.